Who would have thought on that lazy day in 1933, while on a leisurely drive along beautiful Canandaigua Lake, God would plant in the heart of Dr. Harold Strathern a vision that would change the lives of thousands of people over several generations to come. As the Spirit of God was speaking, the Spirit within Harold Strathern was listening attentively. It was an overgrown piece of waterfront property that supported an old stucco farmhouse and a rickety old barn, yet by God's grace and for God's glory, it might one day become the summer home for the missionary work of the Interstate Evangelistic Association. With the help of his friends, Don and Howard, the Joss brothers, Harold Strathern saw only the beginning of a vision, yet obediently claimed it for the cause of Christ and purchased the property in 1934. Armed with God's vision and Doc Strathern's vigor, it began to grow from an abandoned brush-covered farm and vineyard to what would become known as the Tabernacle on the Lake. It wasn't until years later the name would change to LeTourneau Christian Camp and Conference Center. For the next few minutes, allow us to take you on a short pictorial journey, a journey that shares with you various slices of the camp's evolution from past to present, some of the tragedies and the triumphs it has experienced, a small sliver of the rich spiritual history, and a glimpse into where God is leading us for the future. Originally, the property became known as the Tabernacle on the Lake. The first tabernacle was located on the waterfront side of the property, and the building occupied the piece of ground that today holds the administration office and small front parking area. People came from many miles away to take part in the preaching services held in this first tabernacle building. Folks even purchased souvenirs from the first gift shop to remember their visit to this memorable place. The earliest visitors would set up campsites and pitch tents on the hillside across the road that they might take part in the many preaching, revival meeting, and Bible teaching sessions being held. As the camp began to grow, Harold Strathern humbly shared and discussed his vision with his longtime friend, R.G. LeTourneau. After hearing of and also believing in the vision presented by Doc Strathern, Mr. R.G. LeTourneau, a dedicated Christian industrialist, graciously and generously contributed to the further development of the camp program. The Tabernacle on the Lake was now able to press on. In grateful acknowledgement of his support, the camp was given the LeTourneau name, honoring Robert Gilmore LeTourneau's worldwide testimony and witness for the Lord. Immediately, the task began of building a new tabernacle. This new building would be located across the road from the original building and would include a large stage area for the speakers and other gospel message presentations. This tabernacle would seat several hundred people and would be much more suitable to handle the growth that was being experienced at camp. Upon completion, the new tabernacle was blessed and dedicated to the Lord's service. Hundreds of supporters came out to show their support for the work that was going on through this wonderful ministry. LeTourneau Christian Camp could now press on. As the camp grew, it was supported with additional structures and more cabins to house the needs of the growing camp. If only the rafters could speak of the countless dedications and salvation decisions that have been made under this roof over the past 68+ years. This humble tabernacle played its part in populating heaven. God was encouraging LeTourneau to press on. The first dining hall to service the camp evolved out of the house built several years earlier by the Interstate Evangelistic Association. It was located on the east side of the property within yards of where the new modern kitchen now stands. This first commercial kitchen was located in a small addition that had been added to the rear of the main house and prepared the majority of the food for the ever-increasing number of guests. It wasn't long before the capacity of the new dining hall outgrew the capabilities of the kitchen, and the old kitchen was torn down to make room for a new, more modern kitchen facility. This would begin another new chapter in the growth of the camp and allowed LeTourneau to continue to press on. With the introduction of new grills, better ovens, and improved equipment, the kitchen-dining hall combination became one of the major contributors to the increased number of people that could be served at the camp. A warm, home-like atmosphere was always present in the dining room. Another finishing touch was added just outside the dining hall that has been enjoyed by many over the years. Built with love by the faithful maintenance staff of the time, the little structure has become a landmark addition to the LeTourneau property. Then, without warning, on March 9, 1996, at 11 in the morning, tragedy struck the camp. A major fire had broken out through a small hole in the chimney of the dining hall. It was 45 minutes before the fire department arrived on the scene and the flames had spread throughout the building. There were times when the firefighters had to back away from the flames due to the intense heat. No one was physically hurt, but many broken hearts were experienced. The fire raged for several hours, and by the time the flames were completely extinguished, they had taken their devastating toll. The damage was extensive, not only to the main structure itself, but to all the furnishings, equipment, and the irreplaceable personal belongings of the Dewey family, who were serving as camp director at the time. Many might have given up, but in the hearts of the faithful there was hope and a trust in God to use this tragedy to launch forward a new chapter in the lives of God's people and God's camp. A monumental task lay ahead to remove all the charred debris, sift through what was left behind, and pray for God's guidance and provision for the future. Once the debris was cleared away and the insurance company had given the go-ahead, the task of building a new dining hall and kitchen began. It was, again, time to press on. The heavy equipment was brought in and construction was underway. Much of the latest renovation to the kitchen could be salvaged. God chose to spare that part of the building, and new construction was added to what remained of the kitchen. The building process took much of the rest of 1996 to complete. It was difficult conducting business as usual without a place to feed the people. A large tent was erected in substitute of a dining hall, and folks were fed outside for much of the rest of that summer. Finally, the day came in November of 1996 when the new dining hall was ready to serve its first group of guests. This new facility could feed 300-plus people comfortably and would prove to be a great asset to the growth of the camp. LeTourneau was again able to press on. Even though several cabins had been erected on the property, many visitors to the camp continued to be housed in tents. The camp had 25 tents that were pitched on the property for just that purpose. The first 6 cabins were built near the top of the hill in the mid-30s. The final 6 were erected in 1941, which brought the total to 25. The camp was becoming like a little village and continued to draw folks from far and wide. There were 2 sets of cabins. One row covered the hill on the south side of the property, and a second row covered the east side of the property across the top of the hill. To this day, the same cabins serve the visitors of LeTourneau throughout most of the warmer months of the year. Thousands of children and adults have scurried across these grassy knolls and have captured untold memories over the years. With the purchase of the property in 1934, this old stucco farmhouse was included in the package. No firm date was established as to just how old this farmhouse was, but it's been suggested that it was built in the late 1800s. In later years, on warm summer days, you could often find a group of campers seated on old park benches or lawn chairs, listening to some of the interesting speakers and preachers that were guests of the camp. After the passing on of Mr. Harold Strathern in May of 1950, it was desired to build a winterized dormitory that would house adult guests and dignitaries. The construction was to begin after the necessary funds were in hand. God blessed their efforts, and LeTourneau was able to press on. In the spring of 1952, the construction began. This new building would serve as a tribute to the man who had become known around the world for his Christian service, and the one God chose to first conceive the idea of this Christian camp. To this day, it's known as the Strathern Memorial Lodge. The north end of the present-day lodge was constructed around the original old stucco farmhouse. Only the roof of the house was dismantled and a new staircase was constructed to lead upstairs from a new doorway on the north face of the building. Most of the rest of the house remained intact. To look at the finished product, no one would know of the history encased within the walls of this new lodge. As the finishing touches were being placed on the building, plans were being conceived to look at future year-round operation of the camp. The construction was of colonial design, with a full-length porch fronting the lake. Windows and siding were designed to harmonize with the other camp architecture. In 1955, the camp began regular year-round operation. The lodge of today has undergone several renovations. New siding, guest room additions, and improved plumbing are only a few of the upgrades added in later years. Still, the lodge provides comfortable, cozy warmth for the thousands of guests who visit LeTourneau in the course of a year. In the early days of camp, even the director lived in humble housing. This was the first cabin that the Seeley family lived in as the camp was being developed. Mr. Seeley later purchased a winter home in Canandaigua. Later on, in the mid-1950s, a new house was built as the Director's House. The idea was to have a place on the property where the camp could be monitored on a regular basis. This building remains dedicated to housing members of the management staff of LeTourneau. Hilltop was another winterized cottage constructed in the woods near the top of the hill to house special guests and dignitaries who visited the camp. Several renovations and upgrades over the years have added to the usefulness of this quaint little dwelling. Lakeside Cottage was not originally a part of the LeTourneau property. In the early years of camp, the property line ended at a line just beyond the end of the lodge. Eventually, the cottage was sold to Mr. Don Joss, who was aware of how the addition would be of value to the camp operation and agreed to sell it to LeTourneau for the price he paid for it. Shortly after the acquisition of Lakeside, the owner of the building known as Bethany House relinquished his reluctance to sell and agreed to allow LeTourneau to make the purchase. Bethany House has also undergone several renovations and today is an important addition to the winter programs held at LeTourneau. Located close to the end of the road where the original tabernacle on the lake once stood, was built the Collegiate Classroom building. This was used to hold teaching classes for the young people who came to camp for several weeks each summer. Years later, that classroom was removed to make way for the Ford Mason Memorial Classroom. Mr. Ford Mason had been for years a faithful supporter of the camp, and this new classroom was to be in memory of the contributions made by this wonderful friend. Shortly after the fire in the dining hall, this classroom was converted to hold the camp office. Today it houses the director's office, and all administration of the camp is carried on from this little building situated at the front entrance to the waterfront side of the camp. In 1940, the oldest son of R.G. LeTourneau was killed in a plane crash. Many friends, business associates, and supporters of the Christian work that R.G. was involved in rallied around and, to show their support, made donations to build a memorial hall in honor of the fallen LeTourneau. In 1941, a winterized recreation hall was built in memory of Donald LeTourneau, and on Labor Day 1941, the dedication ceremony was held at the camp. Hundreds showed their support and attended this sad yet exciting occasion. This building was not only a tribute to a man, but also a tribute to a cause. The bronze plaque remains mounted on the wall of Don Memorial Hall as a tribute to Son and also the Father, who gave so unselfishly to doing God's work. This multifunctional building would go on to serve in many capacities. It served as a banquet hall. It was used as an early classroom for Bible studies. Later, it served as a relaxing lounge overlooking beautiful Canandaigua Lake. It housed the first bookstores and later the gift shop. The recreation hall also underwent several renovations and upgrades over the years. Today, it has been modernized and is used as a game room with snack bar, contains pool tables and foosball tables, ping pong, serves as a study hall or small classroom, and has a patio overlooking the waterfront. The waterfront along this area of Canandaigua Lake has undergone many changes over the years, as this photo shows what the shoreline was like in 1885. In 1935, the first T-shaped dock was installed and began a long history of enjoyable waterfront activities at the camp. This dock served the camp for over 10 years until the storms and flood of 1947 destroyed it in a matter of hours. The shoreline was devastated with erosion as the waves and debris pounded it into submission. The damage was severe to the point that the entire shoreline needed to be rebuilt, but LeTourneau continued to press on. A new square-shaped dock was constructed after the shoreline was rebuilt and again served the camp for many years. A swimming platform was added, along with numerous rowboats, and again the camp shoreline became very popular with the campers. Until in 1972, when Hurricane Agnes again demolished much of the shoreline of the camp with flood-level waters and pounding surf. There was again thousands of dollars worth of damage. The entire shoreline would need to be rebuilt and filled in to recover much of the erosion that took place from the pounding waves. Even through the difficult times, the Spirit of the Lord was upon the hearts of God's people, and LeTourneau recovered and pressed on. As the shoreline was restored and reinforced to be stronger than ever before, LeTourneau was once again in the business of bringing young and old alike to camp to learn of the love of Jesus Christ. For many years now, you will find hundreds of children enjoying the waterfront during those hot summer days between Bible study classes or other activities that nurture the spirit within these young people. LeTourneau has gone through many changes in the physical appearance of the property over its rich history. Much growth has taken place in the area of construction and new buildings. There have been many dollars spent in the production of programs and training facilities. The landscape has also gone through many phases as the population of the lake area has increased. The beauty of God's creation has become even more breathtaking as it has evolved over the past 70 years. However, the most important element of the work that has gone on at LeTourneau has been in the changes that have taken place in the lives of God's people. From the very first person who walked through the door of that first tabernacle on the lake to the most recent conversion of faith that has been experienced in a worship service at LeTourneau, the purpose of this ministry has been and still is today to bring to the attention of people the life-changing message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is what the work is all about. Although in the beginning the groups were small, it didn't take Doc Strathern long to tap into ministries that would quickly help populate this new ministry property on Canandaigua Lake. Because of his association with several missionary groups and other Christian organizations, Harold Strathern was able to draw from many resources in New York City. Since he maintained offices in Rockefeller Plaza, he was in constant communication with a multitude of ministries who were involved in the nurturing of underprivileged children and European refugee children as a result of World War II. Arrangements were made to bring these children to summer camp, where they were taught of the love of Jesus Christ and received the caring and nurturing that was often lacking in their lives back home. Fundraising campaigns were established to underwrite the expenses so there was never a cost to any of these children. They were transported by train to the little station in Canandaigua, and then were driven by motorcade to the camp, where they would be cared for over several weeks in the summer. Every heart was soon filled with joy as they were given wholesome food, Christian love, and would be taught lessons that would change their lives forever. Many of the children were taught English as a second language, and they were taught to read and write. With the help of friends in Europe and the financial aid of faithful supporters here at home, Jewish refugee children from Germany were able to come to America and experience a totally new world from what they were accustomed. Also, Mama Short, who worked in a mission in New York City, was able to bring many of her mission children to summer camp to hear the gospel message. As time passed and the support increased, the groups of young people and adults grew. Before long, every cabin was occupied and countless life-changing decisions were being made in the hearts of these guests of the camp. God continued to bless the work of the camp as more and more groups became aware of LeTourneau and the life-changing ministry that was exploding here. Bible conferences were introduced, and many area churches began to utilize the facilities for family camps and Bible teaching getaway retreats. Many of the young people who were in attendance at these Bible camps went on to dedicate their lives to full-time Christian ministry. It didn't take long to fill the camp to maximum capacity as the word spread throughout the area of what was happening on this little piece of anointed ground. Today, LeTourneau continues to draw young people to camp to receive the same gospel message. Every summer, well over 1,000 youngsters enjoy the teachings and blessings that come through the efforts of the wonderful staff that invest their time and energy and pour it unselfishly into the lives of our future leaders. LeTourneau continues to press on. As we look over the landscape of this facility and ponder the plans for 2003 and beyond, one cannot help but wonder what God has in store for this ministry. As we try to capture in our hearts the uncountable memorable occasions that have taken place on this property in the lives of tens of thousands over the years. As we pray for God's wisdom and guidance for the future of LeTourneau, we realize that the pictures we are looking at today will one day be shown as part of a rich history of the work of God's hands. If you are someone who's been touched by a heart-changing experience at LeTourneau, ask yourself what part God would have you play in the future of this place. Think back to how God has been faithful to you and your loved ones, and how He is constantly preparing all of us to be a part of His work in the future. Remember the times when you were in need and God's hand delivered you and moved you forward. How many times have you experienced a nudge from your Heavenly Father to press on? The time has come for LeTourneau Christian Camp and Conference Center to press on. We have outgrown our facilities and are in urgent need of new winterized accommodations to house the thousands who wish to experience the touch of God through the program supported by LeTourneau. We are in need of larger capacity buildings to house various activities that may go on throughout the entire year. A multifunctional gymnasium and conference building for meetings, sports activities, rallies, and large group and church functions. a place where the young people of today can be taught and nurtured to become the Christian leaders of tomorrow. LeTourneau is asking you to get involved with the task of helping to provide provision so that God's vision for the future may be realized. Ministry has always been a combination of God's people helping to do God's work for God's glory. Won't you prayerfully consider how you might be a part of this task of growing God's ministry for the benefit of God's people? Won't you help us to press on?